How's everybody this morning?
Fantastic.
Hopefully you had an opportunity to get some refreshments. If you have not, please feel free to do so. We'll have some throughout the morning. I'm Sharon Blackman, Provost of Educational Affairs, here for Dallas County Community College District. I'd like to welcome you to the Technology Summer Institute. Our theme, College 2020, Global Connections, Culture, Classroom, Community, acknowledges that technology is growing across all boundaries that is inclusive of culture, the educational environment of the classroom, and spreading throughout our communities both locally and internationally. In 2011, an article in the Education Week publication, Technology and Education, stated that the rapid and constant pace of change in technology is creating both opportunities and challenges for schools. The opportunities include greater access to rich multimedia content, the increasing use of online course taking to offer classes not otherwise available, the widespread availability of mobile computing devices that can access the internet, the expanding role of social networking tools for the power of digital games for more professional training. At the same time, the pace of change creates significant challenges for schools. To begin with, schools are forever playing technological catch-up as digital innovations emerge that require upgrading schools' technological infrastructure and building new professional development programs. And we are going through infrastructure changes at our colleges as we speak. And I thought about when you talked about digital devices, does anybody have an Amazon phone yet?
No.
3D? I mean, you really want to see your messages in 3D and come out at Some schools have been adept at keeping up with those changes, while many others are falling far behind, creating a digital divide based largely on the quality of educational technology rather than just simple access to the internet. This Technology Institute will address both the opportunities that are available and the challenges for facing faculty, administrators, and staff. Our guest speakers will share insight in the future of innovations in the field of technology. The sessions have been developed to share resources and information that will direct you toward the usage of technology in the classroom and office. And the panel discussions will embrace the challenges and how we respond to current and future technological advancements in education. Yes, we even have a Genius Bar that will be open during the entire Institute, on call to answer your most burning questions about available applications that you use or are interested in using inside and outside the classroom. In addition, I hope you have taken advantage of our partnership with Goodwill Industries, incorporated during this Institute by donating your outdated personal computers and electronic devices that you are no longer using. We have placed bins next to the registration table for you to place your computer and devices. I encourage you to take this occasion to examine all of the various types of technology and applications available and foster collaboration and networking with colleagues for the future. Ask questions, share resources, and test your skills of what is new for educators, administrators, and staff that will affect the success of our students beyond the classroom. We hope that you have a very fulfilling day. Now I'd like to bring up the president of Richland College, and we want to thank Richland for hosting our Summer Institute. Kate.
Thank you, Sharon, and good morning to everyone. I'm delighted to welcome all of you to Richland College. I look out at the audience and I see our innovators, our faculty and staff who are constantly pushing the envelope, and I'm so delighted that you come together today in community to hear the wonderful speakers. We are delighted to be your host site at Richland, and when we had the opportunity to be the site, we immediately said yes, because this is so in line with our Richland College vision to be the best place we can be to learn, teach, and build sustainable local and world community. So it is with great joy today that we welcome all of our colleagues from the Dallas County Community College District colleges and locations. And we know this is going to be an exciting day of learning and sharing. You know, the landscape continues to change, and we are so pleased to have our new chancellor on board. He's been with us now 100 days, and he would love to be here this morning, but he was not able to. And I am extending his greetings this morning to each of you. And he was very excited about the agenda and about, of course, our keynote speaker, and really was pleased to see the work that Provost Quinn and all of her team and Sharon Blackman and her team have put into this effort today. So he regretfully is not able to be here. Now, how many of you this week heard the news about Starbucks and ASU? Okay, so when you went to get your triple latte, triple shot, caramel macchiato, et cetera, was there a bigger smile on the barista's face this week? You know, that partnership is so exciting and has the potential to be truly transformational on the landscape of higher education. So everything is changing constantly. That is the given. And we have to be continually pushing our boundaries in order to be on a responsive and even more so on an innovative cutting edge. So welcome. We are here to be your hosts today. Anything that we can do to make the day more comfortable for you, please let us know. And with that, I will introduce our provost of the LaCroix Center, Pam Quinn, and she will be introducing our keynote speaker, who we are delighted to welcome back to the Dallas County Community College District. He is a longtime friend and one of the most innovative individuals in the whole area of technology, so we could not have a better keynote speaker today. So one other question, do you have to be 21 to go to the Genius Bar? No. Okay, great. No IDs needed? No. All right.
We help any and everyone.
No retinal scan to determine whether you qualify to go to the Genius Bar?
No.
Okay, all right. Sounds good. And it must be 5 o'clock somewhere, so are there going to be wonderful refreshments at the Genius Bar?
You know what surprises may be in store.
Okay, all right, got it. Dr. Almost, Pam Quinn.
Thank you so much. I think we've all had plenty of Starbucks this morning, as you can tell. It really is exciting, and we are very excited to be able to participate in this. Audra Bear's been working on this a long time from the LaCroix Center side, many other people, and so it's great to bring our own district together to look at some of the things that are happening in technology. And just so you know, obviously we work in online learning, but nationally the online learning enrollments have gone over 7.1 million online students over this past year, and that's from the research that the Sloan Consortium does. And 10% of all community college students nationally are now online. In our district, over 51% of all of our students have taken at least one online course. And if you look at our enrollments collectively, we are almost 1/3 of all enrollments are fully online. So that is an area of growth. For the last 15 years, it's just been up. I think it's beginning to slow down the growth rate, but still, had it not been for online learning over the past couple decades, higher education really wouldn't have been growing. So overall, so this really is where it is going, and so it's really important that we all take time to continually refresh ourselves and get up to speed and understand what our students are asking for and needing. And the other interesting thing is that for years and years, the average distance learning student was older than our traditional students, you know, in their early 30s, but that number has dropped tremendously over the last several years. So our high school students are coming out ready, prepared, enabled, and willing to take online courses, as well as the older students that really needed distance learning or needed the convenience of online learning because of their lifestyles and the many things that they try to juggle. So it really is important that we take the time to stay up to speed and, as Dr. Eggleston said, continue to grow, learn, and serve our students. Today's speaker is truly a thought leader and is internationally known for the ideas that he has. He's entertaining, he's fun, he's intelligent, he's insightful, and most of all, though, he is a friend of the Dallas County Community College District. I really don't know. I know Mark hasn't been in the field as long as I have been, but it seems like we've worked together for ever, and so it's really been a pleasure getting to know him through the years. And it's funny how you run into people when you're on the road as much as I sometimes am. I see Mark quite often. So Dr. Mark Milliron, his mantra really is that it's an exciting time in education with so much innovation targeted at helping more students make the most of their learning journey. So in the end, for all of us, it's all about students, and this is a pathway through technology that we can reach them. He is best known as a champion of education opportunity and a catalyst for conversations on innovation and on the road ahead. He is an award-winning leader, author, speaker, and consultant, and he works with universities, community colleges, K-12, all facets of education, and he was just telling me about his global tour that he's getting ready to embark upon with the U.S. State Department. Currently, Mark said many different jobs along the way, but currently he is the Chief Learning Officer and co-founder of Civitas Learning, and that is based out of Austin. So Mark has traveled and had many jobs, but he is now probably back in Texas and doing his work from here in Austin and still traveling throughout. He was the founding chancellor for WGU Texas and was deputy director of post-secondary improvement for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, endowed fellow, and director of the National Institute of Staff and Organizational Development at the University of Texas at Austin. He really has met many and is considered one of the key people in the entire country that knows where all of this is going and knows how to pull it together. And he has an incredible ability to connect technology with people and with minds. He has been a senior lecturer and director of the National Institute for Staff and Organizational Development and vice president of education practices at SAS and president and CEO of the League for Innovation in the Community College. Recently, he won an award from Newton, which is the National University Technology Network. And Newton is an organization, a national organization, based at the LaCroix Center. And Newton recognized Mark for his many achievements and exceptional contributions to the field. And we are very blessed to have worked with him for so long. So it is really my pleasure to introduce Mark, a friend and, like I said, thought leader that we can all learn from. So welcome, Mark. Thank you for being here.
So Pam forgot to tell you that I was president of my 8th grade class. Twice, actually.
You'll get that as a So what I want to do today is engage you in a conversation around this notion of what I'm calling the rise of student success scientists. And it really is around the confluence of a couple major trends and the learnings we're doing in this process. If you're going to start thinking about where technology is going, two big things you got to keep in mind. One, it's happening in the context of all the major policy conversations and practice conversations in education beginning to kind of center around this notion of student success, right? More students finishing what they start. And you've heard the data again and again and again, right? That only about half the students that start in higher ed actually finish. Those data are radically disparate based on income. If you're a high-income person in this country, you are highly likely to finish, and over 80% likely to finish. If you're in the lower income quartile especially, you're in the teens in terms of likelihood to finish. And there's lots of reasons to break that down, especially first-generation status and a host of others, and we can talk about that. But that disparity has made people really begin to think about how they innovate against this challenge of student success. And then the realization that it is a complicated journey, and that most students going through higher education attend more than one institution. You've met some of those folks, right? And 38 million people in the United States have significant college coursework on their transcript and no credential to show for it. And the number one reason why they don't complete is not their inability to compete academically. The number one reason is a family of variables called life happens, right? Cars break down, money runs out, spouses run out, whatever it is. But the challenge is, this is a complicated journey. Now, this is happening concurrently with this rapid expansion and the kind of welcoming of education into this broader context of an infrastructure for teaching and learning that is now infused with technology. And I wrote a piece for the Chronicle of Higher Ed a couple of years ago called Time to End the Family Feud, where I said, we have got to get to the place now where we realize this is not about what's better online or on ground. In fact, the data show that most of our students are blending. They're more comfortably blending than we are. And we've got to start thinking about how we bring the best of our traditions in on-ground and face-to-face education together with these new technologies and new techniques. But I kid you not, the rise of the use of strategic technology tools, everything from the expansion in the sophistication of your ERP systems, your student information systems, through your LMSs, so the Blackboard systems you're using and the learning management systems writ large. The publishing companies are moving incredibly quickly towards the digital formats. You're seeing Pearson and McGraw-Hill and Houghton Mifflin and Cengage all moving to digital distribution. The rise of the open content movement with free and freely available digital content. It's only the digital footprints of our students are only getting deeper. So the thing for us to think about is, how do we begin to leverage those digital footprints in a way and be able to answer some questions about the challenges our students are having along their journeys? Because are they having some challenges? Yeah. So this road trip metaphor sticks in my head all the time, because I take a lot of road trips with my family. In fact, my family in about a week is going to go back to North Carolina for at least 5 weeks during the summer. We go back to North Carolina all the time because I married a woman from Western North Carolina, and I learned the Southern rule that if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy in our household. So we go back all the time into Western North Carolina. And our road trips are full. I mean, we actually this year have one child in high school, middle school, elementary school, and preschool, all in the same year. So our road trips are 4 kids, 2 dogs, a bird, and 2 adults in a Honda minivan for 20 hours across country. Now, lest you think that's an oppressive amount of occupation in a van across country, remember, I come from a family of 9 kids. And in my family, I actually had an African-American brother, Native American brother, Korean sister, and 25 foster kids rotated through my house during the time I was growing up. My mom was a special needs nurse, and my dad was out of his mind. But our road trips were usually at least 7 to 10 people in a station wagon. Remember those old school station wagons with no seat belts and the hump seat? And the kids were smart, sat in the far back, even though you were bouncing around, but because Dad couldn't reach you when he turned around, right? I was reflecting on the difference in journeys on our last road trip back from North Carolina. We were coming out of Western North Carolina in the Christmas time, and for those of you who know this area, we're driving down Highway 81, down towards Highway 40 to go across country. And I had just spent 15 minutes negotiating a fight between my kids, and stay with me on this, about which movie they got to watch as we drove down the road. Anybody else with me on that? So I'm about to launch into the you have no idea conversation with them about how good they have it on the road trips. And I stopped myself, because those conversations never go well. They never really can get how it used to be or whatever it used to be. And so I decided to just take a deep breath and just kind of watch. And so Pam knows through the years, every once in a while, I tell the stories about just stepping back and just observing, because I just think it's a useful process. And so I just sat back. And as we're driving down the road, I sat and watched my wife on her iPhone send about 5 emails, 15 texts, and make 3 phone calls, all managing the re-entry of our kids back from North Carolina back into Austin, because we've been gone for about 3 weeks, and they're involved in everything, right? My 5-year-old is behind her in the car seat on an iPad playing Montessori apps. And by the way, my 5-year-old is tech support for the iPad for my wife. Which is great until he buys things, which he does all the time, right? Like, what is this receipt? Max! My 16-year-old is on her Nook reading a book she has to read for Texas history because our high school, public high school, Dripping Springs, Texas, is BYOD. It's bring your own device. And so all their digital content is that way. So she's reading one of the books for her class. And in the back seat, my 2 sons are playing a synced DS game against each other. And then at some point, my 14-year-old convinces my wife to turn on her hotspot on her phone, and 3 of them log in, and they're playing Minecraft online with friends in Washington State and in Texas while we're driving through Tennessee. Now, I'm thinking to myself, this is not the license plate game. Right? This is a fundamentally different experience for them. And for those of you who think this is some kind of techno-dystopic road trip, one of the things that's really clear is we have learned that human cooperation and strategy really matters. So for example, we go 20 hours straight through, we don't stop. And one of the reasons we don't stop is we've tried, and we can't stop at the hotels with the dogs and the bird. No matter how we wrap up the Bichon in a blanket, they always get it's not a baby, and they catch us. And the other thing we've learned is stop. The thing that can kill you, that can go from 20 hours to 30 hours, is if you do the gas stations wrong in terms of how you stop. So we have it down to, it is like a synchronized circus, man. When we come into a gas station, we pull in, I get out to get the gas, my wife takes the dogs out to go to the bathroom, the kids pair up, they go in, go to the bathroom, get whatever candy they want, I finish paying for the gas, go in, pick up the kids, pay for the candy, get them in the car, drive around, pick up the dogs and the wife, boom, we're out of there, right? And it's like a NASCAR stop. But it's all this kind of human cooperation. But as I was thinking, again, I just began thinking about journeys, right? Pretty clear that the core purposes for the journeys from my childhood and these road trips we're taking now, they're the same. They're to get from point A to point B safely, and to actually kind of reach that kind of goal. What's clear is that the tools, technologies, and strategies are different. Now, I don't begrudge my kids the new tools, technologies, and strategies. In fact, it's kind of great that I get to be a part of that. But what I laugh about is my kids will be trying to explain how hard it was for them to their kids. I'm thinking about how much easier are these road trips going to get, right? In terms of where they're going to go. But what's great is that there are new tools, technologies, and strategies to get from point A to point B. I kind of like that there's GPS systems that tell me when massive traffic jams are going to kill me in Memphis, right? And tell me to go around them. So for me, thinking about what's happening with students on their learning journeys, I'm a big believer that we're walking into a time when we need to leverage the digital footprints of our students, pull them together, and be able to tell the stories of those students and understand the challenges more sophisticatedly and begin to figure out how we drive forward. When we started Civitas, we really kind of began with this idea of how do we take this learning from what's been happening in analytics and the other spaces and really make the most of it in the world of education. You are all living in the world of analytics being used to help you live and play and work, right? So how many of you shop at Amazon? What happens at Amazon while you're shopping? Yeah, it's people like you who bought this, also bought this, and this, right? In fact, we start looking forward to the recommendations to think about what else we should be buying with this, or if there are better options or things that other people have been looking at, because you have the social options, right, too? By the way, that's a massive analytics run. They have to do data mining about people like you. They have to run an instant predictive model on your profile. How long does it take them to get you your data, like a week or a month or? No, runs in under a second. It only takes longer because of your bandwidth, right? Okay. And how do they get the data to you? Do they give you a spreadsheet or a dashboard or a cube or? No, it's pictures. People like you who bought this, and bought this, and bought this. It's human factors engineering. In other words, they figure out how to get it to you the right way. Remember this. I'm a firm believer in this basic framework. What they've learned in the other sectors is you've got to build the right infrastructure to get the right data to the right people in the right way. Say that again. Right infrastructure to get the right data to the right people in the right way. Tell you a story about how that plays out. See the dashboard up here? That is from the Ford Fusion. The folks at Ford, when they launched their hybrid car, really began to kind of analyze customer reaction to it and found out they had a big group of customers that were massively dissatisfied. Most people really liked it, but this group of customers, real problems. So they dove deeper into it and found out there was a whole series of things they were doing wrong, but in essence, they were driving the car incorrectly, including things like they couldn't hear it, so they would rev the engine because it was a hybrid, right? Those of you with hybrids, I know what you got it. So one of the first things they did is they actually came up with a top 10 things you're doing wrong list and sent that to a group of customers. How'd that go over? Not really well. So they had to figure out another way to help the customers get that data and interact with it and then solve the challenge. So they worked with a company called IDEA, which is out of the Design Institute of Stanford. And they came up with this idea and they implemented it and it worked. In the dashboard, the right-hand side, you see this kind of beautiful plant with a flower. That is not a decoration. That is an interactivity. If you drive the car the right way, the plant grows and the leaves come out and the flowers bloom. If you drive the car incorrectly, the leaves begin to wither and the flower begins to die. If you lend the car to your son and the flower goes away, you kind of know that something happened. But this solved the challenge, right? It's figuring out how you get data to people in the right way to help kind of inform the choice, drive the choice. If you haven't read the book Nudge, I don't agree with everything in the book Nudge, but it's a great entree into this idea of behavioral economics, of understanding choice architecture, how you give choices to people in a way that kind of drive things. And I would argue in the world of education, we often have a backward choice architecture. We actually make it easy for students to make bad decisions. Like we make it easy for them to transfer before they get a credential. Doesn't mean I don't want to be transferred, but we make it easy for them to transfer before getting it. We make it easy for them to drop out without talking to somebody. There's a whole bunch of things around that. And you think about just the opposite of it. The simple basic example like organ donation. We have an opt-in organ donation choice architecture in the United States. In Europe, they have an opt-out choice architecture, which means you have to opt out of organ donation in Europe. Here, you have to actually opt in. Their rates are over 90% organ donation. You know what ours are? We're in the teens. Okay? How you architect choices really matters. And part of this has to go back to this notion of figuring out how we can learn from these. And there are folks who've been at this for a while, especially in the consumer space. Unfortunately, in spaces, the gaming space, but especially in places like gambling, they've been at this for a long time. The Harris Casino story will make your blood chill in terms of how they've been using advanced analytics. But the consumer space, we're getting more and more comfortable. We're used to doing it all the time. In the healthcare space, it has been transformational. So I used to be the vice president for education and medical practice at SAS, and I was there when the healthcare analytics craze really launched. And I can tell you with great clarity, it was just as kind of controversial. All the stuff we're worried about right now in education is exactly what they were talking about in healthcare. There is not a single responsible healthcare professional today that wants to go back. You know why? Because little things like prescription analytics that catch interaction effects. When somebody gets a prescription and they do run the analytics check and found out they're taking two other things, that this drug with these drugs will kill you, has literally saved more than 1 million lives. Right? So they now realize there's value in kind of using the data in the right way. This is a video with David Kill, who is our chief data scientist at Civitas. He founded the data science practice at Humana, and what they really discovered is this idea of figuring out how to pull these data together to learn about how this stuff works. Now, how this plays, and by the way, with the Spurs just winning the championship, I don't even know, I know I'm in the backyard of the Mavericks, but this article about, from Kirk Goldsberry about the Spurs and about how they've used analytics, and they don't use just analytics, but analytics is part of the information base along with kind of the coaching and human intuitive stuff that they're doing to kind of figure out choice architecture for how they run specific kinds of plays and how they move the ball. Part of that has been how they use the data to figure out when they come into an offensive set, what's the best first pass? There are 5 options. What's the best first pass that'll lead to the best series of other options? And they started using that to architect how they built their offense. Did it work? Yeah, it kind of worked. Right? And a lot of people are beginning to kind of look at that whole idea of how you can actually think about how you architect this. Now, a simple way of thinking about this in the world of education. So our mission at Civitas is to literally help 1 million more students a year learn well and finish strong. We actually think there's a theory of work that gets you there. If you read the McKinsey study, Winning by Degrees, what you see is that if we can just help larger higher education increase its success rate about 3.5%, you get there. You actually help about 1 million more people a year learn well and finish strong. You don't get there by the typical ed tech mantra, which is burn the village to save the village, which I am sick of. I think what we have to think about is how do we help dedicated, capable educators get the data they need to help make good decisions and kind of drive outcomes. Are you with me on that? Yeah. I think we blame the victim way too often when we are not even giving data to students and faculty and advisors they really need to be able to drive the choices. So this is kind of a framework for thinking about it. Low insight is you can only do the data work you have to do for reporting or accreditation or regulation. High insight is you can do deep predictive flow modeling, which means you can pull data from multiple systems together. You can actually not only pull it together and analyze it, you can build what's called feature variables and compete them to figure out in a really sophisticated way what are the tipping points, momentum points, and flow issues for students. Low action is you're really not innovating with policy and practice and maybe technology. You're kind of just doing things the way you've always done it. High action is, boy, you are innovating. You are doing a lot in your district. You're trying learning communities. You're trying peer mentoring. You're trying competency-based learning. You're using technology. You're doing online. But you're really innovating with policy and practice. What we see is there are a set of institutions that are clearly in status quo. They don't really want to look at the data. They don't think they're doing just great. And they're really not changing much. There are some institutions that have done a lot of data work, this upper left-hand quadrant, a lot of data work, but by the time they analyze and stage and argue about the quality of the data and actually turn out the reports, what has happened to the students about whom they've collected the data? They're gone. Yeah, William Serrata at El Paso Community College calls it autopsy analytics, right? Because you're working on dead data, right? Okay. Or, here's the worst part, or it's so disconnected from the front lines that the faculty advisors and students who actually need the data never really see it in the way they need it, which is where a lot of people see it. Or then you have folks who are in the lower right-hand corner who are just adopting best practice after best practice after best practice. We saw this when I was at the Gates Foundation. We gave hundreds of millions of dollars away in this space, and we'd ask them, why are you adopting this practice? And they would say, because so-and-so is adopting this practice. And say, well, why are they adopting it? We called it the daisy chain, because you go to the next person and say, well, we did it because they did it. Well, we did it because they did it. We can never find out who actually had the original data that said this was an important thing to do, right? Or even if they were implementing it, they weren't testing to see whether or not it was something they could bring to scale or what kind of impact it could actually have on the other side. Our basic theory of work is if you're going to get serious about the use of data in the world of analytics, and it doesn't matter what tool you use or a technology, but if you're going to get serious about it, you got to either dive deeper into this upper right-hand quadrant, or you got to move into this upper right-hand quadrant of being student success scientists, which basically means you're using data to do three things. You're using data to pinpoint what the challenges are and what the opportunities are. Because it's not just about raising the floor, it's also about raising the ceiling. Which high ability students can you push even faster? Can you have to go even harder? So the whole idea is how do you optimize and figure out what those areas are. Two, how do you try and test your innovations and interventions to figure out what's having the best impact and kind of highest lift. And three, how do you get data to the front lines in a clean, clear, simple way so they could actually have data to kind of drive their innovation? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, so that breaks down into a basic framework of what I would call insight analytics and action analytics. Insight analytics is the deep predictive flow modeling to figure out what's happening in your world. And then action analytics are a way to get, and the try and test layer fits in the insight analytics. Action analytics are when you actually get data to people in a way they can use it to drive change, right? And here's the difference. Autopsy analytics is giving you reports after the fact. Action analytics are like instruments during the operation. Kind of good to have data that tells you what the blood pressure is while you're doing the operation, right? It's even better to have Fitbit data way before so you actually stay healthy enough where you don't need the operation, right? So the whole idea is how can you get more action analytics as opposed to the autopsy side? And what's worse, I actually think most of the analytics work in education is still too focused on accountability analytics, not action analytics. And I think until we get off that dime, we're going to have a real problem. Because what happens is then people don't want to look at the data, and they're afraid to have things reported, and they're not really going to innovate. Are you with me on this? So if we can kind of lean into insight and action analytics, we can kind of drive the action we're talking to. So I'm going to give you some examples of some of the work we've done. For the last 2 years, we've been, 2.5 years, we've been in a deep dive beta project, and then we've been rolling out brand new projects with pioneer institutions. And I'm just going to share some of what we've learned and some of the work that they've done, and just give you examples of some of the apps they've deployed and what we've kind of seen in this insight. Again, I do not care what tool you use or what strategy you use. I'm just going to share the learning side of what we've done. We named Civitas Learning because it means a community learning together. Civitas means community or citizen. So I want to share some of the examples of what these folks have done. Here are some of the folks who've been working with us. We specifically have gone to different sectors, 4-year, 2-year, for-profit, and even the kind of major systems and not major nonprofits. You know, as diverse as UT System to Morehouse to El Paso Community College to Austin Community College to Valencia. The idea is lots of different use cases, very traditional instruction to really innovative online competency-based kind of accelerated. Just so you know, the models are going to be distinct. Go. So I'm going to give you 5 key examples, and then I'm going to unpack some of the learnings in this. This first example is an app that's called Illume that is going to be deployed with 10 different institutions this summer. It's in the process of being rolled out right now. The idea of Illume is to shine a light on the insight analytics so people can more quickly and easily see the dynamics at their own institution. And the idea here is for you all to be able, anybody to be able to actually dive into the different student segments and clusters and be able to look at what's been happening in the past and what's likely to happen in the future. To get here, you have to do feature variable creation work and other stuff, which I'll talk about in a bit. But in essence, it's 4 core predictions: incoming student success, likelihood of course completion, year-over-year persistence, or graduation rate. You pick your prediction, and then you filter your cohort, and the idea is you grab the filters from the bottom and you literally drag them up. So this is undergraduate, first time in college from the East Campus, and it'll show you here's how they've been doing with persistence in the last 5 years. Here's how they're likely to do in the next year. And then as you click through it, what it'll do is actually show you the mix of students. That 70% are highly likely to finish. That you have 20% that are in this kind of intermediate range and 10 that are strongly at risk. You can identify who those students are. You get, for those of you who are data geeks like me, you get a full rock curve, so you see the precision of the model. And then you actually get the powerful predictors, which are the variables that are the most important for that segment of students. And what you find out, by the way, is fine arts powerful predictors are different from STEM, are different from Dev Ed, are different from, and what you find is what really matters to those students. And just to give you an idea of how that varies, and what we've seen is, it's not blunt predictors like income that tells you whether or not someone's going to persist. It's actually a feature variable that is created by pulling data from different systems together, like the affordability gap. The affordability gap is the delta between the financial aid they get and the tuition they owe. And if there's a 40% gap or higher, high likelihood of somebody not being able to persist. And that's something you can do. And so the idea is that you don't just look at the demographic variables or the income variables, you actually create these feature variables that actually are more predictive. Then you're able to go in and do tipping points and momentum points. And what you find out when you do this is that we've been doing some one-size-fits-allism. Because what we know is that for some students, taking 15 hours is a recipe to failure. For others, they're absolutely ready for 15. In fact, they're ready for 18. Right? In fact, at one university, we ended up with 7 segments. In one segment, they called fast finishers. One they called slow and steady. Another one they called behind the curve. Fast finishers, if you weren't loading them up with 15 to 18 hours, you were not optimizing your system, and you were actually holding them back. They did better at 15 to 18 hours than they did at 12. And so the idea is you got to really challenge those folks and really push them. The slow and steady, if you gave them more than 12, they were going to leave. Right? And part is because they were working, they were taking care of 2 kids, they were doing other things in their life situation, and we get that, right? But it's understanding the difference. And what we found, for example, is fast finishers, if you got them through 1 term successfully, they're going to finish. You just have to get them through what's their tipping point. The slow and steadies, you got to get them through at least 2 terms. For the folks who are behind the curves, you got to get them through 4 terms before they're going to be successful. So part of it's figuring out what are the tipping points for the different segments. Now, again, this is for the data geeks among us, but for the planners and leaders and people who are thinking about who the folks are in there, the idea is to shine a light on your different students and see where that pulls together. Insight analytics are a must. You've got to get the insight right, and we'll talk a bit about what we've learned in this process, but once you do that, then I think you focus, what we've learned is you focus most of your energy on the front lines. I'm going to show you 4 frontline action analytic apps. This one comes from Austin Community College. We've rolled this out in the last year and a half. Our data showed that they had a real challenge with advising. In fact, our data showed that they had a significant number of students at the beginning of any term that were enrolled in toxic course combinations. In other words, combinations of courses that you knew with great clarity they were going to end up with a DF or W on their transcript. We were at another university that we actually gave them, we were working on another project with them, and because of Austin's analysis, we came and did the toxic course combination analysis with them, and we gave them a list of 1,007 students. They have 90,000 students. We gave them 1,007 students who we said with great clarity are going to have a DF or W just based on what they're enrolled in this term. And the provost at the time said, that's really interesting. Let's work on our project here, then we'll come back and look at what happened with these students. At the end of the semester, we came back. All 1,007 had a DF or W on their transcript. And the provost in the meeting sat there and said, I want everybody around this table to realize we knew this before the term started, right? And it just had to do with the fact, a student who's weak in math, who's taking 3 math-intensive courses at the same time. Or, you all gonna get how this plays out. But the choice architecture is there. Who is the dominant advisor for first-generation students when they're going through community colleges? Friends and family, often who have no background in higher ed. We're helping them choose courses. So part of it's figuring out the choice architecture. So what we did with Austin, we actually did an ethnography, and we got on the ground and did about 300 hours of ethnography to figure out what happened in advising sessions. And what we found out is about 25 minutes of a 30-minute advising session was them checking different systems and actually paper and pencil sometimes, verifying where a student was and whether or not what they wanted to do was even possible, as opposed to any kind of conversation about why do you want to change or why do you want to do that or anything kind of deeper. So they wanted an app that would more simply tell them where is that student and what are the options next. So what they did is we developed Degree Map. And Degree Map and this app goes to advisors and to students. And this app shows them in one fell view, the green is what you've already done, blue is what you have in progress, the orange is what you have left, how many credits you've completed. And when the student starts looking at the Planning Courses tab, they'll click on Planning Courses, and it'll basically say, students like you, at this stage, here's the next set of courses you probably should take. And it'll let them build a course pathway to completion based on the predictive model of how they can choose synergistic combinations to help them get there and succeed. Okay? And the idea is to help them avoid toxic course combinations, find synergistic course combinations, and to stand on the back of the stories of students who came before to make better choices. Does that make sense? So at Michigan State University, where we're talking with them, they talk about this notion of 6-1 students. 6-1 students are students who are second, third, fourth, fifth generation students who are scaffolded by the stories of, of their family who came before, right? 6-1 students have 2 parents and 4 grandparents, all focused on them finishing. Many of our students are 0-1 students, or they're -2, -4 students because they have people in their lives who don't understand or appreciate or value their journey, right? So they actually get pulled away from this. We've got to figure out how we scaffold them with the kind of better stories. And the other thing this does, if they want to change majors, it'll do an analytics run against all the possible credentials in the catalogs they qualify for. And we'll say, here are the top 10 other credentials you could transfer to, you'd be farthest along. And if you don't want that, say you have something in mind, you can literally, you could choose one of those or whatever you have in mind, it'll put them side by side. Here's where you are, here's where you want to go, here's how much more money it would cost you, or in this case, how much less money it would cost you, and shows you the credit mix you'd have to be able to change to make that decision. Do you think that'd be helpful? Yeah. We rolled this app out in a pilot program in the spring, and the advisors who were using it went rogue and passed it out to other advisors, which was kind of great. So we knew it was kind of working. So we came back in the summer, and Virginia, who was working with us to kind of drive this at HTC, they basically kind of rebelled and said, we're not doing another pilot. The advisors do not want to pick and choose who gets us and who doesn't. Just open it up and see who wants to use it. So we opened it up, and they got 90% adoption, 38,000 degree plans filed in 60 days. And to me, the most powerful outcome of this was, in fact, there's a good learning brief on this at Civitas Learning Space where we talk about this, was the fact the advisors said this changed the advising conversation. Because the students who had used it had done 15 permutations of this before they ever walked in the door. It's just like you going to the doctor these days, right? You go to WebMD and self-diagnose and come in with printouts, right? It's a different conversation. I gotta tell you, and this was really hard for my family, big, crazy family you heard about. My father passed from cancer 7 or 8 years ago, and it was just tragic for my family. But I got to tell you, the fact that we have the data architecture we have today around what was going on with his cancer, it was a totally different experience. And I talked about this with my dad in his last year and a half, because he had to deal with his mother dying of Alzheimer's, and how the only place they got information was from the doctor, and how they lived and died between the doctors is just to find out what in the world was going on, and how our family, all the adult children, had done every research there was on small cell lung cancer. We knew everything. And so when we're talking to the doctor, we're asking him all these detailed questions about this, and this, and this, and this. And my dad was like, where did you guys go to medical school when I didn't know about it, or what's happening here? And it was just a different experience because we were informed and we were engaged, right? The same kind of thing is happening here in terms of the scaffolding. You suddenly change the conversation. And what the advisors say is suddenly was not can I do this, it was why. Why do you want to change majors? What's happening? And what can I do to help you in terms of that conversation? Does that make sense? Yeah. Different way of doing it. Give you a couple of other examples to make sure we're good on time. This one is a faculty app that actually pops up within Blackboard, and what it does is it just instruments engagement and gives you a heat map of engagement for students that's updated every 4 to 6 hours. So it watches what's happening in the LMS, the SIS, and some of the other digital curriculum resources. And what it does for the faculty members is they call it the thermostat, whether or not it's heating up in here, right? And what they can toggle it by grade, and when they toggle it by grade, they actually find out like this student is getting an A, but they're low engagement, which means they're kind of phoning it in. They might be able to be challenged to go to a high level. They also find students that are highly engaged who are getting low grades, and what that might mean is it's not because they're not trying, it's because they're off target, which makes the faculty think differently about that student. It's not that they're not trying, it's that I need to figure out how to get that energy in the right direction. The thing I love about this app is it's not pedantic. It doesn't say do this or do this. And anytime you click on it, you can click on an individual student. It'll give you that student's information, what's driving their predictive model, and it'll compare them to the rest of the class. And it'll give you some recommended outreach. It'll say, based on what's happening in your class, you've had 4 people move from low to high. That's great. You've had 3 people move from high to low. Something might be going on. And it cascades the risk from other areas. So you know this, if a student has 5 classes and they withdraw from one class, for some students, that is a huge indicator that something's going on and they might end up dropping the other 4 sooner or later. The idea is once you figure that out, you cascade that risk, and so the other faculty members who have this app actually see the risk factor change for that student, and they can drill in and find out what's happening with that student, right? And the idea is you suddenly get a bunch of people involved in this conversation. Valencia is rolling out a version of this that's going to have both the risk heat map and the engagement heat map in this. The thing I like about this is that it actually instruments engagement to get people thinking about how to get more students engaged. And one of the things that they say they do is they'll look at their engagement heat map before a class. They'll do a set of activities during the class, and then that evening or the next day, they want to check it again to see whether or not engagement went up. So they're actually kind of using it as a thermostat in some ways. This has not been deployed. It's been out now in its 4th term of use. It has not been deployed once where we haven't seen anywhere from a 3 to 4% persistence bump and when it's being used. Because, again, I go back to this notion of getting the data to the front lines. You suddenly see the lift go up because you can get precise about the connection for the folks who are kind of standing this in. Let me give you another version of this. And again, another way of getting the data. This is a risk heat map that's given to both advisors and to department chairs. But for example, think if you're an advisor, you can think of all the students that you're in charge of. It'll updated daily. Here are the students who are fine. They have 73% of them, high likelihood of finishing that term. They're doing well. You've got 12% that are intervention targets that have some issues. You might want to think about how you reach out. You've got 15% that if you don't do something soon, you're going to lose those folks. And you literally see them turn gray in this app if they drop out. And the idea is you see your caseload change during the term, and you also see the risk factors. And if I toggle this, what I'll find is the risk factors are incoming variables, activity variables, attendance variables. The thing I like about it is activity variables take over incoming variables within 2 to 3 days, which basically means what students do matters more than who they are. So that a lot of the demographic things wash out because you just kind of watch what students do in terms of their behavior, how often they're connecting with other students, how often they're kind of doing their kind of work in this. The great thing about this also is it lets them try and test outreach. I'll give you 2 examples. One, at UMUC, they figured out when their risk model was triggered, They used to send a note to the student that was an email that said, from what we can tell, there might be something going on. Here's what we think is going on. Here are some resources that are available to you. Here are some people you might want to talk with. That was their kind of early warning system flag and what they would do. Then they would try to do some kind of a follow-up phone call. They tried that, and our chief data scientist, everybody's found, okay. Got money. Sorry. So they tested that. Our chief data scientist, who came out of healthcare, said, well, what they have found in healthcare is that getting patients to take agency over their own health has huge impact. And you got to get this. It's like students taking responsibility for their own learning. And what they actually called it, they called it people participating in their own rescue, right? So how do you get them to actually do something? So he challenged them to try something different, and the outreach that had a higher lift than the email was literally a text message from the advisor to the student that said, "Are you okay?" with a question mark. That was it. And that pinged, what was interesting is the students just kind of went, actually something is going on. This is happening and that's happening, and it started a whole conversation. But it was the idea that, I like the idea that they tested to figure out what was the right outreach. Give you another example. The folks at DeVry used this risk model. They were trying to get students to get re-enrolled for the next term earlier and trying to make sure they had their semester planned as opposed to waiting to the last minute. Any students wait till the last minute here? Yeah.
No, not
Never, no, never. So they tried 5 or 6 different things with champion challenger testing, which is one of the things you can do with the analytics built the right way. And the one that worked was, I love this, for the blue students who are highly likely to finish, they sent them an email 4 weeks before the end of the term that said, "Congratulations, looks like you're going to finish strong this term. Based on our data, here's the next set of courses you probably should take. If you'd like us to register you for them, click yes and we'll take care of it." For the yellow students, they set up a phone conversation with an advisor, and for the red students, they set up a face-to-face meeting. That's what had the highest lift. And the thing I love about it is that, one, it triaged the time for the advisors to figure out where they could spend their best time. And two, it actually rewarded the folks who busted their tails and were doing well. And what the students said in conversation was it felt like a reward for work well done. And it made me think, I want to bust butt next term because I want the same thing. Right? And again, that idea of kind of reinforcing the behavior. The thing that's great is, again, it's just figuring out how they're going to use the data and how they're going to try and test this. A couple of other models before we jump into what we're going to learn. We're rolling out this fall with El Paso Community College and a couple of others, depending on one of the big grants we have in right now. Probably Morehouse College will be the next. This idea of a Fitbit for students around behaviors. We're using non-cognitive factors. We're using a combination of ETS's instruments and Angela Duckworth's grit score. And the idea is, what we're testing is how do you get an app right to students that motivates behaviors that lead to positive academic outcomes. So the students self-identify, okay, I want to get straight A's this term, right? They tell us what their goals are, and then we actually instrument the kinds of behaviors based on the data, students who've come before, students who got these grades, here's what they did. And we actually instrument that, and they actually have goals around timeliness and focus and attentiveness and how many other people they're connecting with. And we're going to figure out what are the right motivation strategies, what works for which kind of students. Do you have to motivate younger students differently than you would motivate returning students? We don't know. We're going to figure that out, but this is the first version of the app. And how many of you have fitness or Fitbit kind of apps out there, right? They are taking off like crazy because, again, it drives agency. The thing we like about this is we are already seeing in our data is that students taking responsibility for their own learning, that, again, getting students the data really matters. And if you really believe in issues like self-regulation and all that kind of, you actually kind of owe it to the student to get them the data, to tell them when they're on target and off target so they can actually self-regulate. This is going to be a really fun project. Then, this is an app that's at UT Austin. I love this app, it's so simple. It's for very traditional instruction. What they did to try to create a better, because you know the students who are online have a big, deep digital data stream. Folks who are in traditional education might not have the same data stream. So one of the things they did is they wanted to, one, create instructional support, and two, create a richer data stream. So they created a Facebook app called Hoot Me. Hoot Me, here's what it does. It identifies high-ability students who might be ready to be challenged, and they ask them to be owls. Owls are first-level Q&A support to help other students who are stuck. So if you're in a class of 50 students, they might identify 4 owls, and the 4 owls, again, serve as Q&A support for students who have a question around a lecture or a set of assignments. What they find, by the way, is that students are 3 to 4 times more likely to ask an OWL a question than a TA or a teacher, okay? And what it does is it creates this huge kind of back channel interaction conversation around what people didn't get, right? And you end up with this sociograph of who's talking to who's connected. By the way, you find students who are totally isolated. They won't reach out, they can't find, and you actually find if they're having challenges, they're high risk, and they're not connected to anybody else, you could actually challenge the OWLs to reach out and say, is there anything I can help you with? And it starts this kind of conversation going on. The other thing it does, by the way, for the faculty members is it gives you this immediate muddiest point research that says, we did this on Thursday, I'm about to come in on Tuesday. Based on what I see in the OWL research, here are the top 5 questions that are coming back. So I know what people don't get. Okay? And again, it's interesting because it creates this kind of data stream for folks who are coming in and out. Again, what we have learned in this work, by the way, is that you have to make the connection. It's great to do all the back office IR stuff. If you don't get it to the front lines, you don't get any lift. You have to get it out to the front lines. And there are lots of different ways. Our vision, what we want to do is actually, we're going to do 7 to 10 really high quality apps and make them available to people in the Civitas. And then we're going to open the APIs and let institutions and other folks, in fact, folks at UT Austin and Penn State and University of Arizona are all over this, we're going to have them develop apps. And the idea is to create this ecosystem of apps, because I actually think the app that'll blow our hair back hasn't been thought of yet. Right? The idea of how do we get data to people in a way that actually helps drive the kind of choice architecture. And there might be apps that are just for teaching history, right? Or just for teaching writing or whatever it's going to be. It's figuring out the usage cases, which is going to be really kind of interesting within this. I just want to share some of the big learnings from this work and then open it up for any questions you might have within this, because we have learned a lot in this process. One is we've learned that every institution has a different digital footprint. You have different ERPs, different LMSs, different use of regional tools, and so it takes nuance to be able to pull this together. And you have different kinds of students who are in different kinds of journeys. And so you've got to be more sophisticated, and you actually have to do this at the student level for an individual institution. In fact, there isn't an uber predictive model that works across higher ed at all. You have a map for succeeding at your institution, a data map that is unique. And in fact, what our modeling shows is not only is it has to be student level and institution specific, you have to retune it every term. So as you get new data in from the new term, it's basically a 5-term models we've settled on, where you throw out the 5th term back and you bring in the new term and you just keep refreshing. It's the equivalent of updating your GPS maps. Right? Because your policies change, your practices change, and your procedures change, and so you want to update the predictive flow model for the students that come through. We wish there was some kind of Uber analytics model that said, here are the 5 things that indicate success or failure in students. It doesn't work. I'll give you a simple example. There are some students for whom withdrawal pattern, hugely predictive. If they withdraw, it is a giant sound in the wilderness that they're about to leave. And if that one withdrawal means something big is wrong and they're trying to cope with it, and they might drop the other courses. Other students are strategic withdrawers. They take 5 courses always intending to drop one of them, right? And you just said that was me. Heard that, right? Okay. And the thing is, you got to figure that out, because what will happen is you'll waste advisor time, right? If you throw the flag on everybody on that, because it's not precise for it. We've learned that combining insight and action analytics creates a virtuous cycle. You get that by getting the insight analytics right, feeding the frontline analytics. Frontline analytics do things, and it creates more data. It then feeds your predictive model. And some of the really interesting things is things like the Fitbit app and the faculty apps, it's just figuring out what happens in that. It actually creates a data stream. You saw already with like HoopMe, it creates a sociograph so you can see how connected students are. That creates data that makes the insight analytics better. The front lines matter, absolutely, and one of the things we have to do is empower faculty and advisors and students to become student success scientists, right? To try and test what works. Marie Sini said this best. She wrote a piece for one of our online forum that basically said the predictive model is only the beginning. Yeah, it's all about trying and testing the things that you want to do about it, right? What do you do because of that model? Design thinking is a must, which means you've got to think about how you design these in a light, clean way. If you guys have to adopt one more major technology architecture where you have to learn 50 things, are you going to kill somebody? Yeah. These apps have been designed to be pull-based, which means they're simple and useful, and you should be able to intuitively figure out what they do pretty quickly. In fact, when we rolled out DegreeMap to students, we thought we were going to do training sessions with them. They literally bumped our advisors aside and said, we got this, and went after it, right? Because if you design them in the right way, but we have to keep instrumenting that kind of design. Learning together as we do this work is going to be vital, because I think, this is just to be blunt, the consumer world and the healthcare world have billions of dollars to spend on this. We don't. So I think we're going to have to actually use the brain power of collectives, right, to be able to pull this and figure out what works and for whom. A couple of other big things, and I'm going to get a little data geeky on this. You've got to do cluster work and feature work. Why? Because you can sub-optimize your predictive model if you don't think about your clusters. What do I mean by that? You have some students who have deep digital footprints, some who have light digital footprints. We have actually patented something called data availability segmentation optimization, which means we actually create clusters based on data availability. So these are deep, these are medium, these are low footprints, and you optimize for each of those different clusters and you make the most of them. So what's interesting about that is as you start deploying the apps, so we did that faculty app. The funny thing for that faculty app is for the first time in that university's history, online and blended courses closed the gap with on-ground courses in terms of completion rates. And the on-ground faculty said, that's not fair, they have that app thing. Right? Which was funny. Which actually inspired a number of them to use their LMS more, because they wanted to create more digital footprint, which we think is kind of great. The toxic and synergistic course combinations is a really big deal. You got to do the analysis. Actually, I think there's real opportunities for us to think about how we design programs and how we've actually sequenced our programs to figure out whether or not they actually create synergy for our students. There's real link here. If, for example, in Texas, we're funding based on student outcomes. You can actually connect all this to the funding model to figure out how that plays out. Good conversations in our community around course scheduling optimization. Once you start doing this, you start thinking, wow, I could link this to student outcomes. Think about course scheduling. Our course scheduling, and I know faculty are telling me to shut up right now, but I want to say this. Our course scheduling is often focused on facilities capacity and faculty interest. It's not based on what's the course mix that will help the most students finish on time and actually finish. Does that make sense? And if we flip that model and say, let's actually, one of the apps we're talking about creating is an app that would go to department chairs that would say, here's a preloaded course matrix that would optimize the completion of the students in your charge. And the idea is they think about the courses they offer based on this. We actually did this run in one of our places and found out, for example, that they had to build 2 more labs. Because if they actually wanted their students to graduate in 4 years, it was a university, they had to increase their lab capacity and they had to increase their courses because they had students who needed those labs in sequence to be able to graduate. Now, if they'd asked their students, they would have told them that because they kind of knew that. But the data really kind of pointed to that. There's real value probably in social network and peer network analysis. In other words, figuring out who's talking to who and figuring out how you connect, and we'll talk about that in a second. We're doing some interesting work on sentiment analysis and the whole idea of being able to do natural language processing, which basically means on forums, what you see is the stress in students. You actually can just watch and how they post things and what they post. And then there's really a discipline for innovation if you do this right. You begin to want, the folks at Strayer are off the chain about this now. They want the data around the interventions. So if you change late registration, you want to see the impact of that. If you change this policy, we had one institution that said, we have invested millions of dollars in student scholarships and we have no idea if they help completion or not. We just don't. So we actually did an analytics run for them and came back and were able to show them this set of scholarships, great lift for completion. This set, kind of a middling lift. This set might be important to do because the donors want to do that and there's some relationships there, but it has nothing to do with increasing completion. And we're actually able to show them interaction effects, where if you do this one first and this one second, it actually drives more completion. But that's when you begin thinking about your discipline of what you're going to pull out. And final thing. There's a lot of buzz out there around adaptive learning, the idea of personalizing learning pathways. If you don't combine adaptive pathways with adaptive learning, it's sterile. Because you might think that that student is struggling with that concept because the presentation is wrong, but we know that if a student is going through a life situation that is broader, the reason they're struggling is they can't focus. And I'll just be honest about this. I went through a divorce in my early 20s, and I was in grad school. I couldn't focus and read on anything for a year. I got the first B's I had gotten in 4 or 5 years in higher education because I couldn't even focus. Now, they could actually look at that learning experience and say, boy, I had all kinds of problems. The curriculum must have been terrible, or that must have been, no, it had nothing to do with that. It had to do with life situations, right? So figuring out how we combine those things. I do think competency-based personalized learning, learning-centered models actually give us a better data stream as we're pulling this out. But I want to leave you with 2 basic frameworks. You're going to have lots of conversations around technology and education and where you go. And I want you to have you think about these 2 frameworks. I'm a big believer that frameworks help you kind of pull things in a way. So insight and action analytics, one major framework for you to pull away. But these 2 in particular. Vision framework 1. If you want to make the most of your technology footprint and think about how you leverage data in this process, consistently think about K. Patricia Cross had this mantra when she studied brain research and pulled it into education. She said, if you look at the best of brain research, learning is always about making connections, right? And if you want to make the most of your technology infrastructure and your connection strategy, you want to connect students to content, context, and community. So you want to connect them to the best content possible, the best context possible, relevance, application, utility. How does that learning actually work? Okay, and community, other learners like them, and maybe a community of practice and a discipline, right? Now think about this. If we do analytics in the right way, think about those 3. A student like you stuck on this concept in chemistry has found these learning resources to be useful. Wouldn't that be great? If you could serve that up at 11 o'clock at night when the student is stuck. Or a student like you who's been stuck on this concept in chemistry has found these 3 other students who are working on it useful and helping answer that question, right? Or this faculty or this TA. The idea of connecting them to other people within a community. Or this simulation, right? Or this internship experience to be useful. The idea is we could be connecting people to content, context, and community in very sophisticated ways. Second framework, and I'm a big believer in this. In fact, wrote an article for EDUCAUSE Review last year that was called, it was an open letter to students. The article was called, you are the game changers in next generation learning. And the open letter to students was basically challenging them. It said, if you look at the research on the non-cognitive factors in education, combined with all the work we're doing to try to create next generation learning, all the next generation learning work we're doing with all this new technology will not matter at all. It will not matter at all if students don't show up on purpose, willing to engage, and bringing a sense of tenacity. Are you with me on that? So, and there is work to be done to engage it. And what we have to think about is how can we use our technology tools and analytics to help students explore purpose? Because let me tell you what, if a student is not on purpose, if they don't know why they're here, other than the fact that they should get an education, if they don't understand that this is going to lead to this, that's their purpose. Their purpose is to figure out what their purpose is. That's just to be blunt. What the research makes it very clear, a dabbling student is a disaster. A dabbling student is more likely to leave higher education with debt than they are a degree. And student loan debt's kind of a problem in this country, right? Yeah, it's $1 trillion plus, $1.3 trillion greater than all the credit card debt combined. Okay? And it doesn't mean that somebody shouldn't take some time to figure out what they want to do, but it means if they don't know what they want to do, they got to do that work. That's their work, is to figure out what their purpose is going to be. They got to be willing to engage, and we have a lot of students who think if I paid for it, I should get it, right? Or an entertainment culture. They think you're supposed to entertain them. They don't realize that education is sometimes hard work, right? When we launched WGU Texas, it was interesting because we worked with our advertising and outreach company. We tried to help them understand that we really believed in this notion of students taking personal responsibility for their own learning. It's kind of the crux of what we did. And the first billboard they came back with was a billboard that said the Texas two-step, sign up, succeed. Anybody else see the problem in that? Yeah, we said absolutely not. You know, the actual two-step is work hard, succeed. And they said, you want to put on a billboard that you want students to work hard and you expect them to sign up? We said, yes. We actually think students are ready to be challenged. By the way, WGU Texas went from 1,500 students to 5,000 students in 2.5 years. They figured out that it kind of worked, and the next billboard they came back with said if it were easy, it wouldn't be Texan, right? You know, then they really got into it, and the next billboard they came back said, if you want easy, try Oklahoma. We said, no, that's not going to work. I said, that's going to get us in trouble. Do something different. But that notion of challenging students to engage and bring that tenacity. But you know what? How dare we challenge students to bring engagement and tenacity to their journeys and not give them the data to tell them when they're off target? I mean, it's like trying to regulate the temperature in your house with a farmer's almanac, right? Having a thermostat kind of helps, right? So being able to tell a student early and often, some students will tell you in a 16-week course, they don't get feedback till 8 weeks in. And if they get the feedback, they can't fix it, right? They're so far gone, they can't fix it. So how do we get them feedback early and often that tells them how they can self-regulate if we're going to do this? So if they do the work of bringing purpose, engagement, tenacity, we need to do the work in these technology conversations of making sure that that deployment is learning-centered, it's all about their learning, it's data-rich, and it's high value, which means it'll lead to a credential, it'll lead to the liberal arts core, it'll help them kind of pull that in. That's how this is going to all come together if we're going to drive this work. By the way, this links, I'm giving you all the PowerPoint presentation. It has all links out to all the articles I talked about and the examples. This actually links out to that next generation learning article for students if you're going to pull this out. Now, two final things as you're going to launch into these larger conversations. And Pam's heard me say this before. I say it all the time for folks like you who are going to lead the charge on thoughtful technology use in the world of education. I am increasingly frustrated by the hyperbole and the histrionics, right? People who think that technology will fix everything and people who think it will end everything, right? I mean, really, I spent the mid-90s convincing faculty that it was going to be okay because email was coming, right? It's true. At this district, I remember when Bill Wenrick rolled out his distribution of conversations on email and all holy hell broke loose. Just because it was change, right? Everyone's lived through this process, right? I remember in 1996, 97, I was telling people every community college in the country will have a website before this is over, and people thought I was on crack. Okay? So I've seen this all, and I've also seen the people saying in the late 90s that all of higher ed will be online within 5 years. And I said, you're on crack. That's not going to happen, right? I always thought, you can go back to stuff I was writing in the 90s. It was going to be a segment that was going to be purely online, a segment that was going to be purely face-to-face, and a whole lot in the middle. And that's what's happening right now, is a whole lot in the middle. Mark my words, things like mobile technology, here. The digital distribution of content, almost all of your content will be dominated by digital distribution of content within the next 3 to 5 years. You are going to have a BYOD strategy, whether you like it or not, a bring your own device. You're going to have to, because that's going to be the digital distribution framework. It's going to be the publishers and open content. So you've got a lot to figure out in these conversations. As you launch into the conversations, be careful, buckle up, and make sure you are guarding against the loud voices taking over. The loud voices tend to be, there's one group that are caustic cynics who are angry about everything. It doesn't matter what you're talking about. You bring manna from heaven, it's too salty, they're mad, right? A friend of mine calls them cave people, colleagues against virtually everything, right? Okay. How many of you can think of a cave person somewhere in your world, right? And if you can't think of the cave person, you might be just one. Okay. They're only equaled, and they are equaled by the true believers. The true believers will overpromise and underdeliver and cut the credibility out of your initiatives. Everything from online learning to collaborative learning. Remember when that was the thing in the 1980s? And if you weren't doing group learning, you were Satan, right? Our challenge is often these really substantive conversations about change get hijacked by these loud voices on either extreme. And they're bullies, and they take over. We've got to be willing to step in and calm down the caustic cynics and temper the true believers and create a space for this conversation. And as you do it, I want you to stay deeply connected to the why of this work. The why of this work. My second day on the job as a small college vice president for academic and student services back in the mid-90s at Milliron Community College, I had to sit, they invited me to come to the safety committee for the college. They said, this is a pretty important meeting. We'd love for you to come to this meeting. And I said, okay, let's go. So I went down to the meeting. They were small college. We're talking 2,500 students. And they said, I walked in the room, and there were 28 people in the room, including sheriffs from Asheville and people from the FBI. And I thought to myself, how unsafe is this college? My first question, right? But then they began to tell me what was happening. We were sitting in that room to figure out how to stop this guy named Jim from coming on campus and blowing his wife's head off in front of her nursing class. And I said, I need more context. Help me understand this story. And they told me Gina's story. Gina had gone through one of our CNA programs and been very successful. The nurses at a local hospital loved her, encouraged her to go into the nursing program. She went and took all the tests, went to the front of the line for the waiting list. Those of you who know nursing programs know how amazing that is. She got to the front of the line, and she got in. She was from a very low-income family. She had 3 kids of her own and was married. She wanted a different life for her kids. She decided to go. Her husband did not want her to go to school. He was convinced that if she got educated, she would leave. So she fought through all that and ended up coming. And she was radically successful. First semester, top of her class, faculty loved her. Husband started getting scared. Their extended family started holding prayer vigils that she would quit and go back to her rightful place in the family. Second semester, her husband started enlisting the kids and destroying her homework and hiding her textbooks. Third semester, the verbal abuse was so bad that Gina would come to campus constantly as kind of an oasis. She would bring the kids and eat dinners there and things like that. By the fourth semester, she started showing up on campus with the bruises and breaks and stories about falling downstairs and all those things. And then he beat her to a pulp and put her in the hospital. And our counselors went and met with her, and she decided to go to a battered women's shelter. And it was the first battered women's shelter for that small rural community. She went to the battered women's shelter, and Jim stormed the battered women's shelter in the middle of the night with a shotgun and grabbed her by the nape of her neck and pulled her out and beat her to a pulp again. Whew. Our counselors went and met with her again. She decided to file a restraining order, and she disappeared. We didn't know where she was. She was weeks away from being done, and she just disappeared. Our faculty were apoplectic, but no one could find her. Even that small community where everybody knew everybody, we thought we could find her, couldn't find her. Finally, she ended up calling one of our trio counselors, a guy named John Saparillas, and said, you know, and John's like, oh, I'm so happy to hear from you. Where are you? And turned out she was in Atlanta with extended family. And he goes, that's great. And she goes, I want to come back. He's like, even better. He's like, we have everything lined up. All the faculty have this all set up. We have this whole plan put in place. She goes, stop. She goes, I want to come back. She's like, but Jim has made it very clear that if I come back on campus, he is going to come on campus and he's going to blow my head off in front of my class. Is it okay if I come? You want to talk about an at-risk student? Right? John had the right answer. John's answer was, your job is to come here and learn. Our job is to keep you safe. So that's what we were doing in that meeting. And luckily, we put the right plan in place. 3 days after she came on campus, Jim came on campus, and we had the right plan, and we were able to take care of it. I cannot tell you a prouder day in my life being a part of the work that we do in community colleges in particular. Had nothing to do with me. Had everything to do with the faculty and staff, and especially Gina's kind of tenacity. When she came across that stage and got her degree and literally watched a family that once prayed she would quit stand and cheer for mom and granddaughter. We were so inspired by her that I actually wrote my first grant, was a grant for Project Safe Place that moved the battered women's shelter to the second floor of the police station, which is a great move, which worked really well. But I got to tell you, what blew me away was 2 or 3 years ago, I went back and had lunch with Gina. She's a successful nurse now, and she told me that all 3 of her kids have graduated college. Okay. Folks, getting Gina into Malin Community College was important. It was important. Getting her across the stage changed her life. And not just changed her life, it changed the life for her kids and probably their kids. It's a ripple effect, right? We are surrounded by courageous, striving, there's a lot of inane nonsense with some students, but we are surrounded by courageous, striving students every day. It is worth every bit of our effort to be the best of our best at being student success scientists, figuring out how we can get smarter about helping them finish what they start. And I applaud you for the work, folks. Thanks.
I know Mark said that he would answer some questions, but we are running a little bit behind. We had a break built in so that we would have some overlap time. He will have conversations with you in a separate session for those that want to attend. Not everybody can get in the room, so let me just tell you that right now. But you will be able to answer questions. We want to thank you very much, Mark, for setting the tone for the day, because this is the work that we want to do. I just have a few housekeeping items that I'd like to share with you. Number one, don't forget about the Genius Bar. We've got very good staff that's there. They always answer all of my questions, and I answer a lot of questions. So please make use of that. We have electronic evaluations. We want to hear your feedback. You know, in the past, we've done the Student Success Summer Institute. I told you last year I'm not doing any more of those. And so this was a first of another focused type of institute where we want you to walk away with tools that you can use. Those of you that are working on your curriculum for next year, you have all summer to continue that work and being able to do that. So make sure that you complete the evaluation. We need to hear that from you. We want to remind you about the e-cycling. So if you brought your old fax machine, like I got mine this morning, and things of that nature, then do that. We have excellent speakers. I'm not going to introduce, but if you are one of our presenters today, would you please stand? I'm not going to introduce you name by name, but we want to thank all of our presenters and those that have volunteered. Many of them are getting ready for their session. I understand we have a little raffle. Come on, hurry up. Where are you?
Does everybody have a ticket?
And while we're doing getting ready for the raffle, I really want to say thank you to Richland College for hosting us. The staff, I always enjoy coming to Richland, although I enjoy going to all of our colleges. But they really take care of us very well here at Richland. And I also want to say a special thank you to the committee members. So if you are on today's Summer Institute committee, would you please stand? Audra, Deborah, and some of my other staff members. Let's give them a round of applause. All right, so Angela, are you ready?
Yes.
You got a number for me?
Just a second.
And we'll have little goodies and surprises for you throughout the day. We've got a great day planned for you. Oh, $10 a corner breaker. I think I'll just keep this. And this goes to last three digits, 449. 449. Oh, I need to. Okay. This is $20 to Hard Rock Cafe. I'm keeping this one. No, last four digits is 389. I mean, last three digits, I should say. 389, very good.